It began not with gunfire or punishment, but with music. A faint jingle, high and tinny, drifted over the barbed wire on a summer afternoon. German soldiers, men who only weeks earlier had marched under swastika banners, froze in place as the sound grew louder. It was not a military song, not a bugle or a marching band. It was the strange, playful melody of an ice cream truck. Through the shimmering heat, they saw it, a brightly painted van pulling up near the camp gates, children from the nearby town already waiting with nickels clutched in their hands. They had been warned about cruelty, about humiliation, about the endless hunger that awaited them in America. And yet here was the enemy, smiling, handing cones to children, even wheeling carts of frozen sweetness toward the very prisoners who had fought against them. Some men laughed nervously, others stared in silence. One prisoner muttered that this must be a trick, some theatrical performance staged to confuse them. But the first bite of cold vanilla on a parched tongue could not be propaganda. It was real, absurdly real, and it rattled them in ways no weapon could. For a generation of German soldiers raised in scarcity, the moment felt like a fracture in reality. The Reich had painted America as chaotic, decadent, barely holding itself together. Yet here was abundance made ordinary, an ice cream truck jingling into a prison camp in the middle of the world's deadliest war. The men looked at each other, unsure whether to laugh or weep. Behind the wire they could still feel the weight of defeat pressing in on them, but outside the fence children licked their cones without fear, without rationing, without bombs falling overhead. The contrast was unbearable. It was as if two worlds overlapped for a brief instant, and they were trapped in between. The sweetness lingered on their tongues, but the bitterness of confusion filled their minds. How could an enemy, victorious and powerful, afford to treat its captives this way? The question hung heavy in the summer air, with no easy answer. And so the ice cream truck became not just a vehicle of frozen desserts, but a symbol, a reminder that their expectations were already crumbling. It would take time to understand what this moment meant, and why the reality of America clashed so violently with everything they had been told. To grasp that, we have to step back, to the long road of captivity, to the fears that gripped them as they were taken from the battlefields and shipped across the ocean, still uncertain of what awaited them. They had not imagined the road to captivity would stretch across an ocean. When the fighting ended and the rifles were wrenched from their hands, many of the captured German soldiers braced themselves for a brutal march, for reprisals, for hunger gnawing at them until their bodies gave out. The propaganda had been clear: America treated its enemies as animals, as slaves to be worked until death. So when trucks arrived, orderly and efficient, to take them from the battlefield, there was already a dissonance. The guards were stern but not cruel, quick to shout but quicker still to provide water on the long drives toward collection points. Fear lingered in every step, though. It was the fear of the unknown, of the abyss that had opened once their world collapsed. The first true shock came aboard the transport ships. They were herded below deck expecting filth, expecting airless holds like cattle crammed for slaughter. Instead, the bunks were clean, the air faintly smelled of disinfectant, and in the mess halls they were given trays piled higher than most had seen in years. Thick bread, canned fruit, even coffee. One prisoner later recalled staring at the steaming mug in his hands, unable to drink, convinced it was a mistake. Others whispered to one another that this was a facade, a trick to soften them before something worse was revealed. But the meals kept coming. Each day at sea was marked not by deprivation, but by abundance that felt almost mocking. Crossing the Atlantic was a strange journey into disorientation. The roar of the ocean outside, the creak of the hull, and the smell of frying meat from American kitchens blended into a rhythm that was nothing like captivity, as they had feared it. Some men dared to joke in whispers. "If this is prison, then what is freedom?" But the laughter died quickly. Letters from home had told them of shortages, of ration cards, of families struggling for potatoes and bread crusts. Here, the enemy's soldiers ate like kings, and even their prisoners lived better than German civilians under the Reich. The contradiction was too large to ignore, but too dangerous to speak aloud. When the ships finally docked on American shores, the prisoners were marched past sprawling harbors lined with Liberty ships, cranes moving ceaselessly, cargo stacked high in neat rows. Factories churned smoke into the sky, and trains rumbled in and out, carrying goods in every direction. The sheer scale of American industry was terrifying in its own way. They had been told the nation was clumsy, uncoordinated, too distracted by luxury. But standing there, shackled in line, they could feel the hum of power vibrating through the docks, and for the first time they began to understand why the Reich's war machine had stalled. As they boarded trains that would carry them deeper into the heart of the United States, uncertainty thickened again. Some imagined they would vanish into coal mines or sweatshops, condemned to labor unseen until their bodies gave out. Others clung to faint hope. Perhaps this strange order and cleanliness meant survival, even dignity. At night, as the wheels of the train hammered the rails, men lay awake on hard benches, listening to the whistle cry into the dark, each one wondering if the journey was a prelude to suffering or the beginning of something far stranger. That answer came slowly, in the places where the trains finally stopped, the sprawling camps ringed with barbed wire, neat rows of barracks, and guards who treated their duty more like routine than revenge. Inside those fences, the next layer of shock awaited them, not tricks, not cruelty, but comforts that began to eat away at everything they had believed. The barbed wire was supposed to mark the boundary of misery, but inside the camps the prisoners found something that unsettled them far more than hunger or cruelty ever could. The barracks stood in tidy rows, each with wooden bunks that had mattresses stuffed with clean straw. There were washrooms with running water, soap, even mirrors. For men who had slogged through the filth of the Eastern Front, it felt absurd, almost insulting, that their captivity was cleaner and more orderly than the billets they had known in Germany. The food became the first undeniable fracture in the image they had carried with them across the ocean. Breakfast arrived on time: eggs, bacon, oatmeal, bread thick with butter. At lunch they were given meatloaf, potatoes, cabbage, sometimes even a slice of pie. Many stared at their trays in disbelief. Some ate slowly, suspicious of poison. Others devoured everything, shame gnawing at them as they remembered wives and children scraping for scraps under the rain of Allied bombs. The Red Cross letters that reached them only deepened the contradiction. Mothers writing about ration lines, about empty shelves, about neighbors boiling turnip greens for soup. Meanwhile, the prisoners grew fuller by the week. "I have never eaten so well in my life," one confessed in a diary later smuggled back to Germany. He did not know whether to feel grateful or guilty. It wasn't just the food. Libraries stocked with German books appeared in the camps. Soccer fields were laid out, and guards even refereed the matches. Some camps allowed classes in languages, in mathematics, even in philosophy. The prisoners were stunned by the generosity. They had braced for chains, for mines, for endless labor in fields under the sun. Instead, they were being told to study, to play, to read. Was this captivity? Or was it humiliation dressed as kindness? Whispers spread through the barracks at night. Some insisted the Americans were soft, foolishly wasting resources on their enemies. Others warned that this was psychological warfare, a clever way to shatter their pride without a single blow. Yet no one could deny the small comforts that piled up day after day. Cigarettes were available in camp canteens. Postcards could be sent home. Radios hummed with jazz and news broadcasts in English, voices from another world carried through static. And then, on afternoons when the camp quieted into a dull routine, came the sounds that cut deepest: the laughter of civilians outside the fences, the chatter of women walking to the market, the shouts of children playing baseball. Freedom itself echoed just beyond their reach, casual and careless, a reminder that the war had stolen everything from them, but not from the people they were meant to defeat. Each new revelation was not just comfort, but contradiction. Their world had taught them to expect brutality from enemies, yet here they were, eating better, resting better, sometimes even living better than they had in uniform. It created a hollow ache inside, a sense that something fundamental had been broken in their understanding. If America could be this abundant, this confident, this casual with generosity, what did that say about the future? The questions grew louder with each passing week, and they would find their sharpest edge not in libraries or classrooms, but in the moments when culture itself crossed the barbed wire, through music, through games, through small acts of leisure that revealed not weakness, but a society unshaken by war. It was in the quiet spaces between work details and roll calls that the true weight of captivity revealed itself, not through suffering, but through glimpses of another life. Guards lounged against fences, chatting casually with one another, their rifles slung carelessly, their laughter unforced. To men raised under the stiff posture of the Wehrmacht, it was unthinkable. Authority in Germany had been sharp, cold, unquestionable. Here, it seemed woven with a kind of ease, as if power didn't need to shout to be heard. On Sundays, the camp loudspeakers carried the sound of church bells from nearby towns. Sometimes local congregations invited prisoners to attend services under guard. Inside wooden chapels, Germans sat side by side with American civilians, singing hymns in a foreign land where the stained glass windows glowed unbroken by bombs. It was a strange equality, unsettling yet comforting, and many prisoners later admitted that those services were the first time they felt treated as men again, not enemies. Then there was sport. Baseball diamonds carved from the earth by prisoners themselves became arenas of curiosity. At first they laughed at the strange game, too slow, too complicated, too undisciplined. But soon they found themselves cheering for the crack of the bat, the sprint around the bases, the roar of guards and townsfolk who joined in as spectators. Soccer matches were played too, Germans against Germans, with Americans officiating and sometimes even joining the game. The barbed wire seemed to dissolve for a few hours each week, replaced by sweat, competition, and laughter. Music drifted through the camps as well. Radios hummed with Benny Goodman and Duke Ellington, names foreign yet infectious. Some prisoner,